Yo, what's good, boys? It is Yap MMA. We are back with another video. Today, I'm going to be discussing why I believe the Apex is actually a good thing. I was planning on making this video about why the Apex was a horrible thing before this past weekend, before we had UFC Vegas 105. We've had a few Apex cards this year. We opened up the year with 101. Vegas 101 was not a good card. It was not a good card. There were some fun fights here and there, but it wasn't a good card, right? We had 101, 102 was okay. 103, we also had the Manel Cap versus Asu Almabayev, the controversy there. We had 104, Roman Dolidze, Marvin Vettori 2, was not a very fun fight. And then we just had this past weekend Josh Emmett versus Lerone Murphy. Very, very slow, boring fight. Good win by Lerone Murphy, but this is why we have the Apex. I really wanted to create a video why the Apex was a bad thing, but after this weekend, it was a horrible card. It was a horrible card. I didn't even want to make a recap of the card. I was out with my friends. I was drinking and stuff. I was watching the fights, and I was like, I'm not even going to recap this fight card. I didn't even want to, honestly, because it was such a bad card. There were a few flashes of good fights. Obviously, Ode Osborne got a nice knockout. Dion Barboza got a nice submission. There wasn't anything crazy. There wasn't anything crazy. It wasn't a great card, and that's why we have the Apex. All right, a lot of people complain about, oh, why don't we have fight nights in different places all the time? One of those main things, one of those main factors, is the fact that they would be bringing people like Torres Finney, for example, who seems like he is not UFC ready. He's not UFC capable. But they bring people like that. They put them in the Apex. They chuck them in the garage, man. They make them scrap it out. See if they're even worth a contract. See if they're even worth keeping in the UFC, rather than putting them in front of a crowd where it's more stressful. There's more pressure. There's also a crowd that's going to be booing if it's a shitty fight. Like, imagine the Torres Finney Robert Valentine fight. If you haven't seen that, go rewatch that fight or go watch that fight. Such a boring fight by Torres Finney. Just hugged him up against the fence the entire fight, got a couple takedowns, landed four significant strikes. Four significant strikes in a mixed martial arts fight in the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship of the world, the best fighting company in the world. And he lands four significant strikes and just holds Robert Valentine up against the cage for 15 minutes. The most boring fight I think I've ever watched. I was crashing out. This is why we don't have fighters like that in front of a home crowd. That's why we don't have fighters like that in front of a crowd. UFC fan base is some of the most toxic, some of the most very picky people out there. I mean, I would know firsthand. We tend to get a little bit amped up. We tend to get hyped. We get in over our heads when these people are much better than us at fighting. Obviously, they beat 99% of the crowd in fight nights and pay-per-view cards, but we still get real annoyed at fighters that are boring, right? So imagine Torres Finney clinching up against Robert Valentine for 15 minutes in front of a crowd. It's just booze, right? People are paying a lot of money for those fights. I mean, tickets are not cheap. The UFC makes a lot of money off those ticket prices. I mean, if you look at the tickets, I'm thinking about going to UFC 315. Ticket prices are mad expensive just to see Bilal 50-45 just to see Bilal 50-45 JDM. It's like $500 for a minimum ticket, right? We're talking about up in the bleachers. $500 Canadian. That's pretty pricey, man. I mean, when you compare that to other sports, hockey, NHL, NBA, NFL, the baseball league, all these things, when you compare all the sports, UFC is definitely one of the biggest grossing. When they sell tickets, they're grossing a bunch of money, and fans have to pay those sharp prices for a fight night that could be bad. Do you know what I mean? We had London wasn't the best fight night. Those tickets were super expensive. The average cost for those tickets was £500. That's a crazy amount. Ticket prices are expensive. Paying the fighters is obviously expensive. And when you have to pay fighters like that in front of a home crowd, they're making more money. And people are paying to see those fights. They're losing money, and they're going to be pissed off if they see Torres Finney clinch up against the fence against Robert Valentine for 15 minutes. If you took that Apex card 105 this past weekend and you chucked it in some random state in the US, I'm sure it would have sold out. Guaranteed. It's the UFC. It would have sold out. Don't get me wrong. But it would be a waste of money. People would have been disappointed, and there would have been a lot of criticism. That's why we take those people. That's why we take Estela Nunes, who was 6-5 in the UFC, now 6-6. We take girls like that, we take fighters like that, and we chuck them in the garage, man. Initially, we hate the Apex because we want more people to be able to watch the UFC. It makes sense, right? It's hard for the UFC to go around the world, go around Canada, the US, Europe, right? Like, and try to get to all these different places and show different people their fights. But at the same time, we have to realize that if we bring shitty fights to different places, people they're still going to pay for the tickets, but they're not going to enjoy themselves, right? So it's like it's a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. And after this past weekend, I just have to appreciate the fact that those fighters were in the Apex and not in front of a home crowd. Imagine Lerone Murphy versus Josh Emmett, 5-round main event in front of a home crowd in the U.S. or some sort of state in the U.S. It would have gone booze, right? Good win by Lerone Murphy. People hate on it. People hate on it, but he played it smart. He had good IQ, and that's what a lot of fighters don't have. But it was a boring, boring fight. There's no making that up. It was boring. So was the co-main event. Pat Sabatini, Joe Anderson, Brito, we thought there was going to be a finish. It was still a fun fight. Pat Sabatini demolished, but there was no finish, right? Like, there was not many finishes on the card. It wasn't super exciting, and it was one of the worst cards of the year so far. So when you have these Apex cards that are just meh, they're just meh. I'm glad that we have these fighters and these meh Apex cards in that garage in Las Vegas. It's whatever, We can still watch it from home. We still get a good view. If people want to go to the Apex, they can still pay for those tickets. It's just not really worth it. You might as well just watch it from home. And I understand that people are still going to criticize the Apex. I'm still going to criticize the Apex because there are some times where they have a main event and you're like, this should be in front of a home crowd. A lot of people speculated we need Josh Emmett in front of a home crowd. It's gonna be a barn burner. Josh Emmett, Lerone Murphy. Like, no, they knew. All right. And soon there's gonna be Movsar Evloev facing off against what's his name, Pico something man from Bellator, and that's the Apex main event. That's an Apex main event. That's what you should have in the Apex. All right. Pico's fun. That guy, the guy from Bellator is fun. But let's be honest. Movsar's gonna get a unanimous decision. That fight was just announced, or it's in the works. I'm pretty sure. That's a boring fight. That's a fight that should be in the Apex, right? So there is a double-edged sword with, like, okay, some of these fights should be in front of a crowd, like Esteban Ribovic versus Nasrat Hakparas. That was a great fight, right? There's a lot of these fights in the Apex that should be in front of a home crowd and should be in front of a crowd, but it's not worth it because there's only a set amount of fights we can be booking in front of crowds, in front of a live crowd, a live audience. There's pay-per-views. There's one every month. There's fight nights, which are almost every other weekend, and that's they always try to have at least one fight night per month in front of a crowd, and then 2 Apex per month. So I kind of like the schedule. It is shitty to have a lot of Apex cards, but we're having a lot of these guys that are building themselves up in the Apex as well, right? Like Pat Sabatini this past weekend. I mean, he got a dominant decision over Joe Anderson Brito. He's fought in the Apex a lot, and he's starting to deserve to be on a fight night in front of a crowd. And you build these guys up, you build up their momentum. Shavkat was built in the Apex, man. I mean, he was built up in the Apex. Tatsuro Taira was built up in the Apex. A lot of these guys, they're built up in the Apex, and then they get brought into the rankings. They're in the rankings, and then they're in front of a home crowd. It's nice. It's good. Lerone Murphy as well. I mean, a lot of people hate on his fight style, but he's smart. He plays it safe, and now he's going to be in the top 10. He's going to be fighting in front of a crowd, I would assume, man. I don't think they're going to chuck him in the Apex again now that he's nearing the top 5, right? He's nearing the top 5 of featherweight. So it's tough. The Apex conversation is always going to be tough. There's going to be mixed opinions. People are going to hate the Apex. People are going to love the Apex. I don't think anybody loves the Apex, but it's going to be mixed opinions no matter what. So it is what it is. But I just think the Apex is actually something that we do need when we look at the bigger picture of things, right? We don't want these shitty fights in front of crowds and people booing, right? We don't want people paying overpriced for tickets just to watch a shitty fight night, which is supposed to be an Apex, right? So that's the whole video, boys. I know it was kind of a random ass rant. I just had to. I didn't even want to recap this past weekend, the Apex. It was just so bad, but I wanted to make this video because I feel like, honestly, having the Apex for a card like this past weekend was good because we wouldn't want to see that in a home crowd in front of a live audience. But that's the entire video, boys. If you did enjoy the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, drop your comments down below what you guys think about the Apex, and I will catch you boys in the next one. See you.